As he stumbles from disaster to disaster, both in Ukraine and at home, Putin is getting scared, paranoid. He sees threats in every shadow, drones whenever he pokes his head out of his bunker, and knives just waiting to be thrust into his back. This fear is driving Putin to take ever more desperate measures to ensure that he, above all else, survives. And that desperation could spell the loss of his control over Russia in a way that he never imagined. Something dark is happening in Russia. Putin is transforming Russia's FSB into a new version of the KGB, all to quell his fears. But that's a dangerous move. The more power the FSB receives, the less control Putin has over Russia. Soon, the FSB will take over. Putin is setting the table for his own demise, and he doesn't even see it happening. In an explosive August 7th report, Bloomberg revealed that Putin has started to massively expand the power of Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB, allowing the group to crack down on elites that Putin now fears may be gunning for him. Desperate to maintain his grip on power, Putin has charged the FSB with taking out critics and ensuring that nobody can really challenge him inside Russia. As Moscow-based political analyst Andrey tells Bloomberg, the FSB has become the management company of the country. The political administration, the foreign ministry, and the financial economic bloc have been reduced to mere technical staff, serving decisions made with a secret service bias. In other words, the FSB is running everything that matters in Russia right now, as Putin diminishes the power of other organizations and the elites that work within them, all to safeguard himself from the truth. Putin fears his elites. The people who once answered to him are growing increasingly alarmed at the failure of the systems that Putin has created to deal with the impact of the war that he started against Ukraine. Mounting challenges are leading to increased criticism as Putin faces backlash over his handling of the war, the effect the war has had on Russia's economy, and the fact that Ukrainian drones are striking all over Russia, bringing the invasion back to Russia's doorstep in the process. Putin is a man who has had to watch as tensions among his elites have risen for years. In May, the Center for Eastern Studies said that signs of systemic decay were prevalent across all of Russia's major institutions, making Putin's position within the power structure he created much weaker. In the same month, iStories reported that Putin's fear of an assassination attempt, as likely from the inside as by Ukraine, has led to the Kremlin being put on high alert amid a wave of crackdowns. Former Russian Minister of Defense and now the Secretary of its Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, has been marked as a potentially destabilizing actor by Putin and his FSB. Other elites, such as the head of Russia's Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov, now senses so much weakness in Putin that they're willing to openly criticize his policies. In April, Zyuganov stood in front of Russia's State Duma to declare that Russia's economy is set to collapse and that Putin may soon face something similar to the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Putin is facing backlash among his elites. That backlash is coming ahead of Russian State Duma elections, which could end up being the biggest challenge to Putin's authority seen since the beginning of the Ukraine invasion. These elections are set for mid-September, and they'll be the first State Duma elections that Russia has held since Putin invaded Ukraine. They come at a time when Putin's approval ratings are cratering, and there is a growing desire for his war to come to an end inside Russia. Putin sees all of this, and his response has been to empower the FSB to the point where it's basically acting in the same way as the KGB operated during the Soviet era. The crackdowns have begun. As Putin descends into paranoid madness, the FSB has been given free rein to target anybody who might be a threat to his power. The co-founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, is among them. He has been hit with a terrorism charge, reportedly due to his allowing Ukrainian security services to use the messaging app. This is an app that is freely available to the public all over the world, making this claim of terrorism an excuse concocted by the FSB to enable Putin's attempts to crack down on Telegram inside Russia itself. It seems more likely that Durov has been charged because he was unwilling to provide the FSB with a backdoor into Telegram that would give it unfettered access to every message sent on the platform. Boris Nadezhdin is another casualty of the FSB's rampant crackdowns. An anti-war politician who was banned from challenging Putin in Russia's 2024 elections, Nadezhdin has been charged for displaying extremism symbols by the FSB. Why? But he dared to show a photograph of the late Alexei Navalny, himself a victim of Putin's desire to destroy every form of opposition when he was trying to run against Putin. Nadezhdin has since escaped from Russia and is in exile in France to avoid the FSB after being declared a foreign agent. Other crackdowns include an August 7th series of raids in Moscow's financial district targeting 9 unauthorized cryptocurrency exchange networks. More than 20 people were detained, and the FSB accused the exchanges of laundering money stolen from Russian citizens through phone scams and converting it into cryptocurrency that was then transferred abroad. Strangely, several of those detained claimed on camera that they believed they had actually been working on behalf of either the FSB or Russia's financial watchdog, Rosfinmonitoring. Whether those claims were genuine or the result of scammers impersonating Russian officials remains unclear, but the raids are another example of just how deeply the security services have inserted themselves into Russia's political and economic life. And that growing power is creating problems even for some of Putin's closest allies. Take Sergei Kiriyenko. Kiriyenko was Russia's youngest ever prime minister and has served as first deputy of staff of the presidential administration for close to a decade. He is widely regarded as one of Putin's closest and most influential confidants and has been one of the principal architects of the Kremlin's domestic political system. Yet even Kiriyenko increasingly appears unable to control the security apparatus operating around him. According to reporting by iStories, Russian security forces increasingly act autonomously, sometimes arresting officials connected to Kiriyenko's political network without even warning him beforehand. People from Kiriyenko's own inner circle have also been targeted. In 2024, the FSB arrested Mikhail Polyakov, who was working as deputy security director for the World Youth Festival Directorate, an organization chaired by Kiriyenko. Nadezhdin is another example. Before he was chased out of Russia, Nadezhdin had worked as an advisor to Kiriyenko in the 90s. This may not be enough to call him an ally of Kiriyenko in the 21st century, but there is a connection there, and that may be enough for Putin to turn his FSB attack dogs onto Kiriyenko. The conflict goes deeper than individual arrests. Sources close to the Kremlin and Russian security services have described an escalating struggle between Kiriyenko's political bloc and the Siloviki, including the FSB. One Kremlin insider described a system in which the old boundaries are disappearing and increasingly nobody, not even someone with powerful connections, is guaranteed protection. This is what power running amok among this new version of the KGB looks like. The FSB is at the center of everything in Russia, and Putin is the man who has made that possible. What we are seeing is Putin increasingly relying on hardliners within the security establishment to preserve the regime. That may sound typical of Putin to an outside observer, but the scale of that dependence is changing. Despite overseeing an authoritarian state for more than a quarter of a century, Putin traditionally tried to maintain a balance between competing factors within Russia's elite: the security services, technocrats, oligarch interests, and the presidential administration. Kiriyenko himself had become one of the key managers of that system. Now that balance is beginning to erode. But the Putin of 2026 is not the Putin of 2016. As the security services gain greater autonomy, figures who once appeared protected by their proximity to Putin are discovering that political patronage does not carry the weight it once did. And Kiriyenko's struggle with the Siloviki offers one of the clearest examples. Putin empowering the FSB may provide greater control in the short term, but there is an irony here. The more autonomous and powerful the security apparatus becomes, the harder it becomes for any single political actor, including Putin himself, to control everything it does. A stronger FSB could therefore become a very bad thing for Putin, especially in the long term. We're about to explain why, but before we do, this is the military show, and we make videos like this to show how power really moves. If you want to see more, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have notifications enabled. It's no secret that Putin has been gradually expanding the FSB's powers, especially during the course of the Ukraine war. That gradual expansion picked up some real pace in 2025, the point where Ukrainian intelligence said in July of that year that Putin was turning Russia into a military dictatorship due to the FSB's power becoming more prominent. That claim came in the wake of Putin signing a decree that no foreign vessel would be able to enter a Russian port without first having approval from the FSB. Further changes in Russia's legal system had given the FSB the authority to control how Russia's scientific institutions cooperated with foreign nations, along with the ability to carry out criminal convictions and nationalize property, UKR Inform reported at the time. Even more power expansion came during the first half of 2026, as Putin reacted to the decline in public support for his Ukraine invasion. The Jamestown Foundation reported in April that the FSB's powers had grown in 5 key areas during the first few months of 2026 alone. Now the FSB could regulate all contact between scholars, both domestic and foreign. The FSB could also choose to block internet access whenever it felt like, as well as open up its own detention centers. Digital networks are no longer safe from the FSB. It can demand full access at any time, which explains the downfall of Telegram's co-founder. The FSB can now even control access to what types of websites Russians will be able to access in the future. And now we have a new wave of crackdowns. There no longer exist any true checks on the FSB's power. It's acting practically autonomously, ostensibly on Putin's orders, but really a power unto itself, to shape Russia in whatever way it sees fit. Right now, the goal is to create a version of Russia that meets Putin's approval. The KGB of the 21st century. Nice and familiar for Putin, who himself was a KGB operative before his political rise in the wake of the Soviet Union's collapse. For Putin, expanding the FSB's powers is about building up an organization that mirrors the one that he was part of for so long. Putin controls the FSB. The FSB does what he tells it to do. At least, that's what Putin thinks. And though that may be true right now, as the FSB cracks down on elites who represent a threat to Putin's power, what the Russian leader has really done is create an organization that can control him. Putin is isolated at the top, with only the FSB being trusted to serve his interests. No checks, no balances, nothing in place to stop the FSB from doing what it wants, especially as Russia's other federal institutions are weakened as the FSB grows stronger. This is a recipe for disaster. Alone and with nobody else he trusts, Putin has set himself up to run Russia the way the FSB thinks that it should be run. Putin's desperate need for control has led him to isolate himself to the point where he can be manipulated into thinking whatever the FSB wants him to think. Let's take a look at Putin's reality inside Russia right now. Obsessed with a so-called special military operation that has failed to achieve any of the goals he set for it, Putin has completely lost focus on running Russia. Every decision he makes is tempered by what's happening in Ukraine. Whenever taxes rise, it's because Putin needs funds for Ukraine. When Putin talks about Russia's population challenges, he really means that he doesn't want to run out of soldiers whom he can send to die in his war. Putin has Ukraine blinders glued to his face, which means he can't see what's really happening in his own country. Putin no longer defines what is in the state's best interest. Neither do the many groups that existed in Russia to help him with domestic policy. The FSB is in charge, and its only concerns right now relate to security. There is no space for social reform. Nothing for helping a population grappling with the economic consequences of the war or the drones that fly overhead every day. Putin is actively chipping away at the very structures that he built to strengthen his hold on power, all to grant the FSB more authority. The FSB that once fell under the authority of the other powers is now above everything else. But again, Putin runs the FSB, right? If that's the case, then surely Putin has simply created a more centralized power structure, with everything in Russia running through him. The FSB as Putin's attack dogs and Putin himself as the master. But here's the thing about checks and balances. They prevent any one entity from controlling everything, to the point where only that entity makes decisions. For Putin, the checks and balances aren't being removed to benefit him. Those removals benefit the FSB. And when the FSB answers to nobody, which is practically the case right now, then it becomes something that not even Putin can control anymore. The FSB will outgrow its master, and we're starting to see signs that this is happening as we speak. We mentioned Putin losing focus on Russia itself for a reason. The obsession that Russia's leader has with Ukraine has put him in the prime position to be isolated by the FSB, and fed whatever stories the FSB wants to tell him. Picture this scenario. Putin summons an FSB goon to give him an update on what's happening in the Ukraine war and in Russia itself. Everything is great, the goon tells Putin. In Ukraine, our troops are advancing at record rates. The Donbass will surely fall by the end of the year. And the people, they love you more than ever. You have no political opposition. We've removed all of that for you, and our crackdowns have ensured there will be no social uprising. Trust us, we're serving your best interests. Now, in the past, Putin would have had other elites and voices in his inner circle who could contradict this type of report, assuming that the FSB was delivering false information to Putin. Now there is nobody like that in Putin's inner circle. And with its unfettered power, the FSB can crack down on anybody whom it views as a threat, not to Putin, but to the FSB's ability to feed Putin the narrative that it wants Russia's leader to hear. Does that sound unrealistic? It shouldn't. Putin has already isolated himself, and reports are leaking through that he is being fed false information from all sources, leaving him trapped in a bubble of delusion of his own making. The FSB has no interest in popping that bubble. Instead, it will keep pumping in information designed to convince Putin to expand FSB's powers further. And why wouldn't he? Putin has no idea what's really happening in Russia right now. He's lost in his own paranoia. Public appearances by Putin have become rare in 2026. That's because he spends most of his time hiding away in bunkers, where he's safe from Ukraine's drones, as well as from would-be assassins and usurpers that he believes hide in every shadowy corner. In a May report, Forbes said that Putin spends almost all of his time in an archipelago of massive subsurface bunkers, where he has developed a distrust of the Russian elite and has shrunk his circle of advisors down to the bare minimum. This is the perfect situation for an FSB that wants to build on its own power by feeding Putin false information. And it's not like this is a new tactic for the FSB or anyone else. For years, those around Putin have fed him false information, either to curry favor or to serve their own goals. On July 15th, United 24 Media published a report featuring comments from Dmitry Skoroboutov, who is the former editor of Russia's state-run Vesti news program. Skoroboutov says that from 2012, his program was tasked with creating a version of the news for the main viewer that was designed to only report what Putin wanted to see. They tried to start isolating him precisely from real events, from the information environment, not to mention contacts with the outside world, the propagandist declared. Was the FSB the they that Skoroboutov mentioned? Even if it wasn't, this report shows how susceptible Putin is to being tricked with false information due to his isolation. We see similarities when it comes to the Ukraine war. Investigative Russian journalist Andrey Zakharov says that everything that Putin knows about the war that he started is controlled by those who want to manipulate him. The situation is that, unfortunately, a country waging a terrible war is governed by a man who refuses to use the internet and entirely depends on two sources of information, the media and the FSB. It's a terrible thing, Zakharov says. The Institute for the Study of War said something similar in late 2025, stating that false war reporting, either from Putin's generals or the people that Putin has assigned to pass on reports from those generals, has given Putin the false impression that Russia is making good progress in Ukraine when the opposite is very much true. So what do we have in Putin, really? A leader who refuses to use the internet and relies on the FSB and state-controlled media for his information. Media that we've just established is being doctored to feed him stories that he wants to hear, and an FSB that has a clear interest in manipulating Putin to strengthen itself. This is all about control, but it has nothing to do with giving Putin more of it. As the FSB's power expands further, it will only strengthen the bubble that it's created around Putin. Russia's leader is being shielded from reality so well that he doesn't realize that the threat from within that he's always feared very much exists. But that threat doesn't come from the elites, it comes from the FSB that he has empowered. And when the FSB is ready to take over from Putin, all it has to do is take a big needle and make the bubble that it created go pop. The FSB is taking over. Putin is just too blind and too paranoid of others to see it. As Putin hides himself away and gives the FSB more power, Ukraine just keeps piling on the pressure with long-range drone strikes that are making Russia's people even angrier with their leaders. What's happening to Wildberries is the perfect example. This strategy is all about raising discontent, and as the FSB strengthens, it may eventually use that discontent as the reason it needs to oust Putin for good. Ukraine's Wildberries strategy is genius, and you can find out why by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you subscribe to The Military Show so you don't miss any of our analysis of the many blunders Putin is making. And thank you for watching.